If you've been following this series, then hopefully you've been through all of the armor. That's a two-part message. And if you haven't been through that, through the armor of God, I'd encourage you to stop this video and go back and listen to those two first, because they give context for everything I'm going to say today. What I want to challenge you to do today, like I said in my last video, or a couple of videos back, this isn't about you sharing secrets with other people, but I am going to ask you a couple of questions and ask you to look at them for yourself and look at them with God. So, and then we're going to talk about how the armor of God on a practical level will soothe and heal and protect you in these areas that I'm going to raise. The best thing you can do is grab a notebook and a pen or a piece of paper, something that you can write stuff in and keep it, because this may be something that you want to refer back to later. So the first question or idea that I want to put to you, and I don't want you to answer this flippantly. I want you to really think about the implications of it before you ask yourself this question. If, without any change to your circumstances, you could wake up in the morning feeling good, feeling strong, feeling confident, feeling peaceful, would you want that? Now, the qualifier there is without any change to your circumstances. And it's really easy to just go, well, of course, I want to feel good, so of course. But the reality is that we tend to focus on the external, and in that, we would fear or be reluctant to see God work in a way that doesn't change the things that we're dealing with. And by that I mean external circumstances, events, problems, questions, decisions that have to be made, financial situations, all of that. If you could wake up tomorrow with no change to your circumstances, but feeling good in it, would you want to? Pause the video for a second and look at your life and ask yourself that. The reason that question is important is because what I want to try to explain to you today is that the greatest barrier, or I guess the way that the enemy likes to keep us trapped, is to keep us focused on the external as the source of the problem. I said many, many messages ago, I honestly don't remember which one it was, but I want to reiterate the idea. The most important part of your sense of well-being, how you feel about yourself and about your situation, whether or not you're safe in it, whether or not you are in a healthy place, whether you can enjoy your life. The most important element of that is not your circumstances. It's how you feel about them. So when a deception that I think is absolutely rife in the church is that God's provision for us, his protection of us, the way that he deals with us is in the external. That for God to answer a prayer, it must be to solve a problem, an external problem, an obstacle or a pain or whatever. That for the way for God to heal, it must be to bring resolution or reconciliation with an external person or event. I would put to you that if you look closely at all of God's promises, And if you put them in the context of Christ's teaching about the Spirit indwelling us and about how God measures us, which is our hearts, not our actions. When you put all of that together, what you have, and when you analyze the fruit of the Spirit, what you have is a picture not of the external world necessarily changing, although it will. I'll get to that later. But in the short term, the healing you need, the protection you need, the provision you need, the way for you to feel that your life is okay and valuable, that you're valuable, all of that does not come from circumstances. It comes from how you feel inside, what you believe about yourself, what you believe about God, and how you feel in the circumstances. Hopefully, you've had an opportunity to meet a mature believer who's able to find peace and even joy, even in the middle of very difficult circumstances. And that, when it happens, is astounding to people. How can you possibly be okay when this is going on? Christ never promised us perfect lives. And in fact, he says we'll share in his suffering. He says because the world hates him, it'll hate us too. He promises that we'll face trials and temptations. There's no instruction in the Word for our lives and our situation with Christ that indicates that our lives are just going to be hunky-dory. There's no promises for that. There is countless promises for the state of our hearts. That we can build our homes on the rock, and that no matter what storm hits, no matter how the wind blows or the waves crash, that we will stand and we will be safe. That is a state of heart. That is a state of being and of feeling. That is not a state of circumstances. You are, in that exact parable that Christ used, being shown that you're under attack. There are painful or difficult circumstances around you, but that you are safe in them. Christ also tells us in Matthew 11:28-30, he says, "Come to me, you who are weak and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest." He says, the yoke that I offer, the burden I give you, the yoke that I offer is easy, and the burden I give you is light. I know a lot of Christians who do not feel, and I used to be one of them, who do not feel that knowing Christ is an easy yoke or a light burden. It feels very heavy because your decisions and actions are effectively in contradiction to the world. So it feels like you're always in conflict, or you're always different, or you always stand out and not in a good way, or it feels like you want and wish for things that you're not supposed to have. I want to put to you that if you truly want your life to change, if you truly want to eradicate evil, if you truly want to find a relationship with God that sustains and fulfills and satisfies you, that you have to stop focusing on the external circumstances. And you have to start focusing on how you feel within them. That is not to say that our emotions drive our faith. But hear me on this. We are emotional beings because we are made in the image of an emotional God. He literally made us like him in that way. And one way that I vastly underestimated him for the longest time was in believing, because often when I got emotional, I was driven to sin, I thought the emotion itself was sinful, and that feeling it was ungodly. I am convinced that that's not true. If you look at Christ, if you look at the way he walked through this world, he felt emotion. He felt sadness, he felt stress, he felt anger, frustration, grief. I mean, the whole gamut, everything that we deal with, he felt. And the difference was that in feeling that, where he needed comfort, he went to God for it. And where he needed to respond to what was making him feel those things, he responded in a godly way. That's the only difference. He is not free of emotion. And if you consciously or otherwise have that kind of assumption about him, I challenge you to go back and read the Gospels again and ask yourself, how would I feel in those circumstances? Because I think you will see, if you ask God to show you, you will see. We're told that Christ, in Hebrews 1, we're told Christ is the physical manifestation of God. That when we see him, we see the Father. And Christ says that about himself too. When you see me, you see my Father. So the way that Christ responds to people is literally the way that God the Father responds to us. And how does he respond? Most often with compassion and tenderness and patience. And where he doesn't have those responses, it's generally because he's standing in front of somebody who's trying to lie to people about who God is or what God wants. Christ was a radical in the sense that he broke down barriers and presented God and communicated God in a way that people were not accustomed to. They were accustomed to thinking of God as a distant king. And he said, no, this is Daddy. This is the place of comfort. This is the place of protection. This is where you go to find the answers your heart needs. Abide in me. That's what Jesus said, John 15. Abide in me. Be rooted in him. And that if you do, your life will change. If you want that, if you want your life to be different, if you want to feel better, what you need is to understand who God is, how he loves you, and what he's given to you to soothe and comfort and prepare and equip you to deal with those external problems. It's not the problem that is causing you to feel that way. It's your understanding of God in it. I think it's important to say that again. It's not the problem that you face that is making you feel fearful or angry or bitter or scared. It's how you understand God to relate to you in it. And when you understand how much he loves you, how much power he has given you, when you understand what he wants for you, which is love, joy, peace, etc., etc., etc. When you really grasp that, the world looks very, very different. What I'm going to share with you now, it's not the only tool to feed into this, but it's the one in context of what we've been talking about. And I want you to see that when he tells us things, when he gives us things, he's not looking to the external and he's not dealing with it on a surface level. He wants to go deep. He wants to heal you deeply. He wants to remove the things, the pains, the hurts, the wounds, the fears. He wants to remove those from you so that when the waves crash and the wind threatens to blow the house over, you are strong and warm and safe, and you know it. Because the reality is, when you know you're safe, any number of things can come against you, and you're like, I'm okay. So, for each of us, the things that have wounded us deeply, and I mean really deeply, those events might be different. The people, the issue, the vehicle might be different, but the feelings that it generates in us are the same. I want you to take your notebook and ask yourself, what things happened in your life, or what things have you done that bring you darkness? And so by that I mean the secrets that we talked about a couple messages ago, the dark corners of your heart, the places that you feel fearful or angry or hurt. It's too scary to illuminate. Those feelings generally come out of events. They will either be things done to us or things that we've done. And often it's both. So, just by example, for some people, there will be traumatic events. When I was a child, I was molested. Or when I was a child, I had an abusive parent. Or when I was a child, I was in a terrible car accident and my body was hurt really badly. Or I watched someone be killed and it made me terribly fearful. Or on and on and on. Everybody has different events that harm them. And out of those experiences, and I'll be clear, in some cases, it's like a momentary thing. You know the day, you know the time, you know exactly this is what occurred, and from then on, I was fearful or I was sad or whatever. For some people, it will be more subtle. It will be a way a relationship was used to control them. Or neglectful parents who never abused but left a child feeling insecure and unprotected, at a time when they needed security and protection. Rather than a natural disaster, there could be, a breakup of a marriage or something that happened over time that created a sense of rejection or abandonment. For some people, these will be, a point and place in time that you can point to and say, that's what happened to hurt me. For others, it will be a longer, slower process. But regardless, these are what I would call soul wounds. They are holes or pains that are so tender and so dramatic that they drive us. Literally, because I was wounded in this way when I was young, I have learned not to trust people in this way. And whenever that type of conflict comes to me, I'll lash out. Or whenever that kind of circumstance happens, I get incredibly anxious. Or, you have to be able to go back and ask yourself, where is my heart hurting so deeply that I'm scared to look at it? And then ask yourself, where was that wound inflicted? In some cases, it will be by another person or by an event. And in other cases, it's a deep-seated sense of shame or self-loathing because of something I did. Often the two are linked. Often I was harmed in a certain way and so fearful or angry or hurt by that it changed how I respond to the world. And now, like I say, whenever somebody comes at me in a certain way, or whenever there's a specific set of circumstances, or just in the course of my daily life, I am so fearful or so angry that that is the reason that I do and say things that I'm ashamed of. It's a spiral. It perpetuates itself. It is the way the enemy deceives us into believing we can never get over this. The world will tell you that when you are traumatized as a child, that you'll spend the rest of your life dealing with that. And there may be truth to that for some people, but I can tell you, if it's true, it's because you've never allowed God to miraculously heal you, heal the wound that was created when you were young. And so as an adult, you've then acted out of that, driven by it, fearful because of it, angry because of it, hurt and sad, depressed, anxious because of it. And in that state, you've made decisions or done things that you regret, that you look at, you know were wrong. I mean, how many times do we see children come out of abusive, physically, sexually, emotionally abusive homes, understand that that's what happened to them, and find themselves as adults inflicting the same wounds on their own children, and they never even realized that they had become the very thing that they hated. It happens all the time. And the reason it happens is because we don't go back and say, where am I so wounded that I can't cope with it? When you open your notebook or your paper, whatever you've got, nobody else needs to see this. Nobody else needs to know about it. Write for yourself whatever you know happened to you or that you did that you know is awful. It's a dark corner. You don't want to look at it. You don't want to analyze it. You don't want other people to know about it, or when they do, you hate that they do. Just note for yourself whatever will remind you of that thing. It might be the name of a person. It might be a day. You know, sometimes we nickname events in our minds. Might be that. Might be just a feeling that you have, but you know where it comes from. List for yourself the dark corners of your heart. And then next to those, or underneath, describe the feeling that they create in you now. So I've already listed a lot of them. They'll make us rage and be angry. They'll make us fearful, anxious. They'll make us sad or depressed. They'll make us shamed, self-loathing, a feeling of humiliation or embarrassment, bitterness, resentfulness. For some of us, it'll be a self-righteousness. For some of us, we look at what was done to us and we throw our shoulders back and we will fight the world and we will insist on being right because what was done to us was unjust and we know better. In most cases, when you drill down, it will be fear. In most cases, it will create fear. Often, anger is a response to fear. I'm scared of that circumstance, or I'm scared of that person. And in order to feel like I'm not helpless, I'll get aggressive. So even where you see anger or rage, ask yourself, where did that start? When did I start feeling so angry? Go back, list the events or the relationship or the whatever where that began. And then next to it or underneath it, list how it made you feel and how it continues to make you feel. What you're avoiding when you don't want to look at it. Because that's all it is. When we don't want to look at something, when we don't want to talk about it, when we don't want to go back to it, it's because of how it makes us feel. We don't feel safe in it. So whatever the emotion is that you're trying to avoid feeling, when you think about that or talk about it, put that next to your reminder of the event or the person or whatever. What I want to show you is, although your events or your people or your relationship may be different than mine, it brings us to the same emotional place. It brings us to the same type of wound. So it may have taken a great deal more in your life to bring you to that spot. I may be far weaker than you as a person, but my events and your events, they brought us to the same spot. This place of fear or anger or bitterness or humiliation or self-loathing, whatever. And I want to show you how God wants to equip you and wants to heal you so that you don't have to feel that way anymore, and you don't have to be scared or angry or bitter or anything. You won't have to feel those ways when you look at those events. Freedom from that grip, because that emotional grip is coming from the enemy, and freedom from that is available. Healing for that comes from God. And when you find that, you look at that same event or that same relationship or that same thing that you did, and you don't feel that way anymore. And that's the beautiful, wonderful thing that God can achieve over and over and over again in your life. And one of the ways that he does that is through the armor that he provides us. And I'm going to talk to you about how